We gotta say, we need this kind of help. Because it's got to be a budget for the community. Like I said, it won't be direct assistance anymore. It will be community assistance. Like a child care center, they can get behind that.
The biggest thing that's going on right now is we're now more than 4 months into this disaster, and yet all of the federal aid is still being held up at some part of the process.
And the process isn't easy, because New York City made the assessment of damages to the city. They forwarded that request to New York State. New York State rolled up the New York City request. He sent it on through to the feds. The feds then took a look at it, they reviewed it, they passed it to the appropriations, to the Congress, which then had to be signed by the president. Then they have to take the monies and they have to come up with an actual budget, line item by line item, and then that's got to go back to the federal government. And then FEMA can always say, well, we don't like this program, or HUD can say, we want your program to be tailored this way.
None of that money is actually flowing through the community. And the community also has to understand how they have to pull that aid in. And if they don't understand the process by which federal aid flows through state, city government, down to a community, it's a possibility that that money would be routed to other communities of need, or it might not ever be allocated at all.
There is no one-stop shop, which is what's driving families crazy. You're having to call 20, 30 different agencies, volunteer groups, government officials, and there is no central clearinghouse of all of these kinds of services.
Give us 3 steps, but don't include that.
Okay, well, we have to, because legislation has to be passed. I showed you what was passed in Albany. Yeah. Nothing. New York State figured that there was $32 billion in recovery. That means making whole the damage that you've had, including $15 billion for New York City. But that doesn't really mean what the disaster was. The disaster is home by home, personal bank account by personal bank account, person put in the hospital or in a cemetery. So here's the fiscal damage assessment broken out graphically. The businesses and the residences are the private losses, whereas the rest of it is government or public losses. This is the part that they can't ask for reimbursement on. That's the insured losses. That's where the private insurers are going to take it in the teeth. This is the uninsured stuff, and that's where FEMA needed to step in. You know, the people who didn't have flood insurance. You can bet that this is going to be a lot of stuff that's just not covered, period. And in the appropriations process, even though I told you that there was $15 billion's worth of assessed losses to New York, the mayor and his administration only asked for about $10 billion worth of federal aid. Only 2 out of 3 dollars are being asked to be made whole. And the first thing they asked for was the reimbursement of the immediate expenses they had, overtime, DSNY, police, fire, etc. They wanted $500 million for schools and hospitals because they got hammered. And then rapid repairs. Rapid repairs had a budget of $500 million. So by November 21st, they had already spent $1.2 billion. So that's going to leave only $8.6 billion available once money comes through. Everything else has already been pre-spent. And they've claimed that it took about $10,000 per house to make them good again. So 19,000 times 10,000 is $190 million. But you had a $500 million budget. Did you not spend the whole budget? Could you have done more houses? We don't have an accounting yet of have they spent the whole authorized budget for rapid repairs. Here's New York Rising. It's newyorksandyhelp.ny.gov, and they have this wonderful thing for businesses and homeowners, except it's excluding New York City counties. So I actually personally called the state and the governor's office, called this helpline, I called the assembly person, Phil Goldfeder's office, and within a day of me calling, suddenly the borough of Queens was available on the form. The website still says the boroughs are not eligible, but now you can at least fill out the form and apply for state help, even though officially for now, we're not allowed to get it. The Help for Businesses is a grant program for businesses. The Help for Homes is a program to do mitigation, some flood mitigation and some habitability rebuilding money. The problem is that there's no state budget behind this. There's no legislation coming through the Assembly or the State Senate on how that's going to be afforded or how many people are going to be helped. The Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is something that they have pre-existing Sandy and allows homeowners to get up to normally $30,000 to raise and elevate their home if they're in a floodplain. And you know that in New York City, $30,000 is not going to go far. Even in Louisiana, $30,000 was not going to go far. And after Katrina hit, they had put aside an additional $750 million for the state of Louisiana to do home elevations. But even though they had that, with the limitation of $30,000 down there, nobody was going for the program because it just wasn't enough to get your home elevated properly. Until it was like 2009, they finally changed it and they let the grant value be up to $100,000. And then everybody started applying, and then within the next year, the term of the program had run out and only half the money was spent. People go like, well, why do I care about elevating my house? If you do not, your flood insurance, which might cost you like $500 a year now, might cost you $10,000 or $20,000 if you do not elevate your homes when those base elevations are made final. FEMA got $11.4 billion for the disaster relief fund. That's separate from the National Flood Insurance Program. And then the Disaster Assistance Direct Loan Program. This is a loan program. They got another additional $300 million for that. Okay, so FEMA's got a good amount of money to put into programs. It's the HUD, H-U-D.
203J and 203K.
Yeah, 203J and 203K loans. The 203J, it's for when your home is catastrophically destroyed.
Right.
It's from HUD. It's a very preferential loan. The 203K is if your home was damaged but is still it needs to be made habitable again. The 203K can be tacked onto an existing mortgage, for instance. How many people here in this room understood that there's $800 million of federal funds, $800 million to specifically rebuild or establish Head Start programs in the bill? In the Public Health and Social Services Emergency Fund, the Social Services Block Grant Program, and the Child and Family Services Program. That is from the Office of the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. And so, for instance, Red Cross has some money set aside for first and last month's rent for move-ins. A lot of people didn't even know that that's out there.
I didn't even know it was out there.
Some of the money from Red Cross is actually being sent to it from the federal government for this program.
So when you call and you're told that it doesn't exist,
You say, I'd like to talk to your manager.
When you're speaking to people who, quote unquote, know what they're talking about,
Right.
and they're wrong, how do we get around the bureaucracy of just being put on hold or pause?
I want you to call me.
Okay. Okay.
And the great answer for a lot of this new funding that's coming through, part of this Public Law 113-2, is you can't ask for it directly. It's got to go through some civic organization that you can ask them.
So who's in charge of the Rockaways? And you know what happens when FEMA hears that kind of stuff? You figure out who's in charge and you let us know how to best direct aid in when you guys are ready. So they want to use a long-term recovery group to direct funding and resources into a community. And they want to have a unified voice for the community.
And tonight was a chance for them to get those ideas down on paper, and hopefully we're going to carry those on to people in the mayor's office, people at the state government, maybe even up to the federal government level, and get those voices heard.
This is the logo, and you guys are the first to see this. This is going to be the new long-term recovery group's website. This is how we're going to start moving this information. And these are the three groups I'm going to introduce you to. The SIRR, the Senate Sandy Task Force, and then, because James Saunders sits on that Senate Sandy Task Force, and then the Rockaway Broad Channel Long-Term Recovery Group. The SIRR is directly plugged into the mayor's office and the EDC, the Economic Development Corporation. And two things that they're working on is an after-action report. So what has happened in 4 months since Sandy? And the other thing that they're working upon is a long-term resiliency plan for what to do with the Rockaways over the next 30 years. And that's what they're looking for, is what are your ideas? Malcolm Smith has had not just one, but multiple town halls in the Rockaways, and they always turn into these complaint sessions like, I didn't get any money. We gotta say, we need this kind of help. Because it's got to be a budget for the community. Like I said, it won't be direct assistance anymore. It will be community assistance. Like a child care center, they can get behind that. And we have to think like secretaries of state, that we're ambassadors of the Rockaways. And then the other one is that commission called the NYS 2100. I think what we really need to do is produce a Rockaway 2100. What do we want to leave for our grandkids? Graybeards. A lot of people call the graybeards. The graybeards are each 129th. It doesn't matter in what zip code you live between the Nassau County border and Breezy Point. If you need direct financial assistance, contact the Graybeards. They're at Beach 129th Street, and they will give $2,000 to any family in need in the Rockaways. Bring us, if you had to replace your refrigerator or your washer and dryer, bring us the bill, we can reimburse you. And they also have gift cards. So the Graybeards is probably your #1 most direct, accessible program of cash benefit in the Rockaways. I can't personally see to everybody's needs, but I want to make sure that everybody's aware of Rockaways Hurricane Sandy, because that's where a community of nearly 3,000 people are helping answer each other's questions, because they've all been going through the same processes, and they find some ways that work better and some ways that are stonewalling. And through support, through mutual group support, how can you keep wanting to fight for what you should be getting?
I think we just need to start holding these cats responsible, you know, for what they got put in the office.
Jerry Maguire, show me the money!
I'm gonna be honest with you.